All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, we usually record well in advance on several episodes, but I just thought it was important to acknowledge that we are actually recording on the Juneteenth, Friday, June 19th. So that means that we should have a lot to talk about. And y'all go ahead and just forgive us in advance as we go down our rabbit trails, even as we try to have a cohesive discussion. Right, Lisa?
Yes, yes, and I will apologize if there's dog barking in the background. The morning has a little bit more neighborly activity, and so my
Ah.
dogs are staring out the window and barking at all the things, which is usually not present when we record other times.
Oh, look, we got all kinds of stuff going on.
Yep.
Neighbors are walking, dogs are barking. I just opened up my patio door because y'all, my HVAC has gone out
Uh-uh.
as we're about to go into July. And
Oof.
so I have my patio door open where it's lovely and comfortable with the fan going and so forth. This is when they decide to mow grass. Of course, this is when they decide to mow
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah.
So we got lots of distractions during this podcast, but isn't that the way it always is in this country? We're always
Yes.
distracted by something. Like we got a lot
Yeah.
of stuff going on at the
A
same
lot of
time.
distractions. A lot of distractions.
Ah, yeah. So, all right. Well, let's get into our kind of word of the week. All right. The reason why I mentioned kind of word of the week is because there's so many June commemorations that I felt like we were kind of robbing y'all by just going with a word. And instead, I thought we should really lift up the June commemorations that are happening, especially because it's so busy. Some of these are specifically DEI related, some are not, but I think they should all be mentioned. Let's just name some of the obvious ones. Just this week, we had the parade for the New York Knicks winning the
Right.
NBA finals.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that just happened in New York City. I mean, people are like taking their hats and the confetti's just falling in there and all that, which is just really a central hub of joy right now. Um, at the very same time, it was the Puerto Rican Day Parade around about the same time period
Oh,
this
okay.
week in New York City as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the opening of the Obama Presidential Center
Yes.
that is
Yes.
happening, kind of the some of the speeches and concerts and so forth happened yesterday, but the grand opening into the actual building is happening today,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Juneteenth, which is very consequential and
Yep.
intentional.
Yep.
I'll just leave that right there. But then we also have some reflection that we have to do because, Lisa, um, we can't forget our LGBT siblings and the Pulse nightclub,
Mm-hmm.
which was an unfortunate shooting in Orlando, Florida on June 12th, 2016, where Omar Mateen shot and killed 49 people, wounded
Mm-hmm.
58 folks on Latin night, which means that the majority of those victims and those that lost their lives were our Latino siblings. So we never want to forget that. I
So,
actually
yeah.
just talked to my friend and her daughter who live in Orlando, and they drive past the Pulse
Mm-hmm.
almost daily. So it's a constant in their minds, obviously.
Yeah.
We also have the Emanuel 9. Notice the trend here. Lots of
Mm.
bullets going on. How about that?
Yeah.
The Emmanuel Nine, uh, who were nine worshipers at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, who were murdered right there in their sanctuary on June 17th by Dylan Storm Ruth,
Hmm.
um, who said, as he entered their Bible study, they were so nice to me. And I really reconsidered doing what I
Oh,
did,
good God.
but did it anyway because he thought he was going to start a race war.
Lovely.
Oh, the church had banners hanging in the sanctuary this week as they remembered and commemorated their lives. But this is also the infamous church where President Obama sung Amazing Grace during Reverend Pinckney's funeral, who's a statesman as well as the pastor of that church. And then just the ongoing foolishness in Minneapolis, St. Paul, because Operation Metro Surge has not gone away. It's continued. They have some renewed targeting of some of our documented and undocumented siblings out there. And so because Renee Good and Alex Preddy, we addressed both of their wonderful lives on this podcast, but please don't think because we stopped talking about them that there's not still major concern going on in the city. So I'll stop there, Lisa, but these are just things that we need to keep top of mind, both joyful and not, as we continue to hold their lives and their lived experiences with us.
Yeah, I like that you have re-mentioned the Operation Metro Serve because it has fallen out of the news. You know, it did kind of, or not necessarily slow down, but it lost its explicit or aggressive tone, but there was still stuff happening. And I think a lot of folks think that there's not an issue anymore when there really is, and that's not just in Minneapolis, right? It's across the country. And then the other thing I would say is I did not remember that this is the 10th anniversary of the Pulse nightclub massacre. I just feel like there are, I mean, we've talked about this too, and my European friends just are constantly in amazement of how this continues to happen. We have so many of these mass shootings annually, and you know, now we're 10 years from this one, which was massive, but there have been countless massive mass shootings since it, right? And we are no further along the pathway to stemming the tide of that violence. So that's a little sobering to think 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, see, I love when live stuff happens that we probably need to acknowledge. Just one quick thing that I'll mention here as I'm talking to you, Lisa, on this podcast. My former boss, who is a white woman, incredible ally to lots of people, but especially to the African-American community. She sent me a text this morning, which is Juneteenth, the morning of Juneteenth, y'all, for those that are listening later. She says in her text, I do not know the appropriate greeting on this day that is both simultaneously joyous and painful. The best thing I could think of was to apologize that any Emancipation Days had to happen and that needed apologies and reparations are past due. Isn't that just beautiful? Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I appreciate how the joyful and the pain comes out in her text, because that's exactly what we were just getting at, is holding these two things together. Like, I can catch Nick's confetti while also being really pissed off about the Pulse on Emanuel 9 and all these things at the same time. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into phase 1. So look, y'all, I think we could get a bunch of 5th graders in a room and figure out the science behind the reflecting pool in DC. I think we could do that, Lisa. We could really pull it together here and just explain the science. So we'll stop wasting $14 million in no bid contracts on a pool that looks like a petri dish. That's what I want to talk about in my phase, Lisa. That's what I want to talk about.
All right, let's hear it.
So besides this being like the easiest metaphor you could ever come up with for this administration, right? So let's talk about it a little bit. So let's go back in history and then come forward. We're going to do a little Sankofa. We're going to look back and head forward. So the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. All right. Oh, Lord Jesus. This pool is not new, and it's not new with its challenges. Okay. It was designed by this architect. His name was Henry Bacon, and it was part of the overall Lincoln Memorial complex. And then they added a few other things to create the layout for the National Mall. And so construction started in 1919. It was completed 4 years later after the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial. And so with that, this pool is very sizable. I've had runs past it countless times. That it's the best way to get your 15 to 20 miler in public when you're training for a marathon, Lisa, because you go through and see the beautiful monuments, but then you also cut towards Mount Vernon in Virginia. It's lovely. It's a lovely run. And so the pool, it measures 2,030 feet long and 167 feet wide. And the depth of the pool is 18 inches at the edges and then 30 inches at the center. So we're not talking about a deep pool that you're going to go swim in, y'all. That's not what we're talking about. And it holds about 6.75 million gallons of water. It's meant to be reflective like a mirror, which is why it's narrow and long and shallow and so forth. And they actually pull this from ancient Egyptian pools and that Greek architecture as well. And these are themes that they're trying to pull. I learned this when I was in elementary school around reflecting eternity or symbolism or anything that you want to look back at as a mirror. And so obviously that makes a lot of sense with Lincoln's very interesting presidency and so forth. Well, this pool has always had problems, right? It's always had problems. It doesn't or didn't at the time really have a solid foundation. So it sunk about a foot over several decades of time. Okay. So it's constantly been sinking. Of course, the structure, at some point, there's going to be a leak. So there's been about 500,000 gallons of water per week by the 80s that had been leaking at that time, right?
Per week? Wow.
Per week. And so they knew this and decided that, hey, look, we need to do something about this. And so they did a big reconstruction in 2009. That one also took about 3 years as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And so all this goes on. We know how important the reflecting pool is. I mean, you can't see a picture of the March on Washington without it. Mm-hmm. President Obama's inauguration celebration. So many things have occurred. Million Man March. All of those photos include this reflecting pool. So then we fast forward to y'all's president. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing an article on WTOP where it's talking about the American flag blue that was painted at the bottom of the pool by y'all's president's standards. I guess he thought that this would be lovely. Okay, so it was painted. And since then, the algae blooms have it looking like anything but blue, y'all. It is almost like radiant green. Like it's the grossest green. Lisa, you and I have probably swam many places that did not look like this. Okay. Right. I would not swim in something that looked like this. I'm just saying. And so the reflecting pool looks horrible. $14 million in a no bid contract was spent on a contractor who had only done swimming pools, had never done anything of this historical significance. Mm-hmm. And we're surprised that big chunks of blue paint are peeling up from the bottom. And so, again, fifth graders could do a better job, because then we see them on the news, at least here on local news in the DMV area, where you've got the maintenance folks pouring peroxide into the green pool, thinking that that's going to clean it, when all it does is continue to peel the blue paint from the bottom, making it go from bad to worse. Lisa, make it make sense. Help me make it make sense, because none of it makes sense to me. And I need to know how the American people are going to be compensated for this $14 million that went to absolutely nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. And taxpayer money, right? So it's our money.
Exactly.
Yeah. 50 billion-ish, probably actually way more than that, I think, on
probably
the
more.
Iran war that we lost. And then we've got the arch and the ballroom that apparently new reporting from the New York Times also said that a bunch of taxpayer money has already gone to the ballroom, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And then this reflecting pool. And so from my understanding, just looking at the reflecting pool before and after, it looks pretty much the same.
That's right. It's not looking any better. And, here's my thing too. So based on my fifth grade science that I'm understanding from what I'm reading, obviously water has to move in order to stay clean. Filter or not, it needs to move in order to stay clean. And so the fact that the filtration system is not looking great, The water is literally stagnant water.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that, and based on the history of the reflecting pool, it didn't seem to have what it needed previously, but it's still, I mean, this is not an upgrade here, people. Like, if you were going to
Right.
spend even $1 on this reflecting pool, it should not have gone towards a gaudy American flag blue paint on the bottom, but instead, maybe an updated filtration system, or
Mm.
maybe there could be some way to, as horrible as the Potomac can be. I've swam in it, y'all. It's not pretty, but at least in some way recycling and refiltering the water from the Potomac, which is literally right there. Like, there has to be something scientific that could have been done that was better than painting it this color in such a way that it was supposed to look like a daggone swimming pool. Like,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't make sense in any form.
Yeah. So it's just this combination of lack of knowledge, incompetence,
Mm-hmm.
not really focusing on the issues that actually matter, like the filtration system.
There you
Because
go.
and it's supposed to reflect Lincoln, right? That's the whole point. And put it in the. I think even without the algae, wasn't the blue going to impact its capacity, the water's capacity to reflect, which was how it was designed?
Which to me is very intentional as well. Like,
Mm,
let's not reflect the values of Abraham Lincoln. Let's not do that. Like,
right.
I'm sorry, but you can't tell me that that wasn't intentional either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if we're going to have a non-reflecting reflecting pool, then just say that. But that, yeah, it's like this whole comedy of intentional errors, in my opinion. Um, it should have been a no bid contract to fix some of those leaks from the joints in the reflecting pool, but no, instead, I don't even know if it's got the new water purification system in there, but we do know that the view is disgusting. And so now I'm like, all right, so what's going to happen here? Because events, people are not going to want to hold events near that reflecting pool the way it's looking at the moment. What does this mean as far as the air? Like, is there anything that's being emitted into the air from the nastiness of the algae and other things that would not make it safe to even be around the pool? How much money are we spending? I mean, obviously, any pool needs uh, someone that's maintaining it, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, this feels like more maintenance than what should be necessary because we're trying to fix a problem that can't be fixed.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, this just feels like how there was an old movie back in the day called The Money Pit where they bought
Yes.
this house and tried to
Yep.
that's what this feels like. It feels like this pool is a money pit where it's like
Yeah.
you should be investing in things that make it easier, safer, and less expensive to maintain it. But it seems like we're going in the exact opposite of that, which is a shame because at the same time, this man is so volatile. It's like we don't want him to go out here and try to make grand decisions to get rid of it entirely because we know the symbolism of what has happened around that pool over the years. I mean,
Now,
like even things like Marian Anderson, for example, she wasn't allowed to perform at Constitution Hall in DC. So they said, F it. We're going to go out to the reflecting pool and she's going to perform an open air concert. Like,
mm,
they're very significant things that have happened in, the civil rights universe of this country at that pool. It just like erasing the reflection of Abraham Lincoln, it wouldn't bother him to fill that damn thing up so that nothing gets reflected and nothing significant is maintained. The same way he did the Rose Garden, the same way, all the things.
yeah. I mean, it's just it's farcical, right? It's like this is just
Yes.
satire, but it's actually real life around spending all this money on a contractor that is ill-equipped to do it and addressing a problem that is not actually a problem. It's something
There you
else.
go.
And
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with wanting to, what is it, beautify DC or fix up DC as the nation's capital. I'm not like opposed to that per se. But when you're also on the record of saying we don't have enough money for Medicaid and Medicare and the states should do that,
That's
and
it.
defunding SNAP and all these other programs that prioritize people who are struggling financially in other ways, and then you drop 16 million, which is actually a really small amount of money when you think of the federal budget, but
Yeah.
you drop that on a pool, and then it's unsuccessful because you've actually made the situation worse by adding hydrogen peroxide, which another thing I read was that hydrogen peroxide is a way to dispel algae, so that's correct, but it has to be balanced with the water to, like a ratio, water to hydrogen peroxide.
Right.
And I don't know if they were doing that, whether they were just taking bottles and just dumping it in. So that might also have contributed to the fact that it's pulling up the paint. And then hydrogen peroxide is also toxic. So if you put too much in, then the fumes from that come up, right?
That's it. That's what I was worried about, was what's happening with the fumes, considering how many people run, walk, or just are tourists past that reflecting pool daily. That's dangerous. Very dangerous.
Well, and if the filtration system isn't working and there's not movement, which is part of the reason why there's algae, that hydrogen peroxide is just going to stay there, right? It's not actually going to flush out of the system.
No, it'll just sit there. It just becomes this petri dish, this ongoing petri dish of water. So I'm like, oh, this is just disgusting. It's bad. It's bad.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So my point being, how can I say, my very suspicious brain always makes me wonder, considering I have absolutely no trust of this man and his presidency, the degree to which he wants to keep the country from reflecting on what we should be.
I mean, I'm sure that's in there. Although that's giving him a lot of credit for some
It
critical
is.
thinking
It
and
is. I know it is.
thought.
I know it is. Yeah. So anyway, I'm very saddened by our for us in the DMV, our local reflecting pool. I'm very saddened by it, but at the same time, it still becomes this comedy of errors for people that know and love these monuments. We run past them for almost every race in DC. It's like the patented route that's already approved. And it just sucks that everything that he touches or gets close to turns to crap. Like, the analogies are just giving us all the things. So anyway, let's dive into phase 2.
Okay, so since we're being reflective on the reflecting pool, I want to stretch that reflection given that it's also Juneteenth. So last night I was scrolling through all of the news coverage of the Obama Presidential Center and what you had referenced at the start of the podcast, and all of the people that are there. And it just struck me as buoyant, joyous, relaxed, friendly. Like, there was just this vibe about it that I feel like is missing, and it just missing now, and it just made me actually pretty sad. Like, I just felt very sorrowful that we have traveled so far from that set of behaviors and collegiality and mutual respect. One thing that struck me the most was that the 4 living presidents were there. So Bush, Clinton, obviously Obama, and then Biden and their partners. And Trump was not invited. So it was just the 4 of them, but there are these pictures of the 4 of them, and sure, they're somewhat staged, but there was a lightness and a happiness about their engagement together. And they have, I mean, obviously 3 of them are Democratic and 1 of them is Republican, but they traverse actually quite a long time frame, and the Democratic Party has shifted quite significantly since the 1990s. When Clinton was in, right? So they don't necessarily all represent the same ideological positions. And yet there was just this camaraderie between them that was kind of emerging or oozing out of the images and the video footage. And then in particular, if you remember at Senator John McCain's funeral back in 2018, there was this clip of George W. Bush handing Michelle Obama an Altoid, right? And it went viral. And so they recreated that kind of, there's these pictures of Michelle Obama and George W. Bush holding a little Altoid can and smiling and laughing together. Like genuine, like belly laughing together is what it felt like. And I guess in April, George Bush was interviewed by his daughter on the Today Show. And he was reflecting on that moment in 2018. And I got the whole quote here that he said in the interview. He said, I get a little antsy, as I'm sure you know, and I was sitting next to Michelle. That's who I sit next to at funerals, which I thought was cute. And then he continues, I was kind of teasing her and stuff, and I slipped her an Altoid, not as a joke, but I thought she might want one. He remembered after they left the service, Jenna, his daughter, informed him in the car that that moment was trending. He says, I didn't know what trending meant. Bush then explained in the interview, the recent interview, why he thought the interaction went viral. It turns out the country is starved to see a white center-right Republican and an African-American center-left Democrat having fun and being able to converse not as political figures, but as citizens. And I was just really struck by that. I don't have a lot of love for George Bush, right? I think he made some disastrous and heinous choices. And he has evolved as a person. That doesn't absolve him of some of the things that he presided over. But the way that this, to his point, this center-right, white, legacy, wealthy man is engaging with people who are different, in particular an African-American woman who is ideologically left, right? And his capacity and ability to do that, and that's what made me sad, like we've lost that. And I was also thinking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's a former Supreme Court Justice, and Antonin Scalia, who is a former Supreme Court Justice. Both have since died, and they were both lovers of opera. These two people couldn't have been further apart ideologically, right? Like further apart than Michelle Obama and George Bush, like pretty far apart. And yet they had this shared love of opera, and they had a friendship, as I understand it, from what I've read from their family members and kind of reports on it. They went to the opera together. I think at one point they actually were given like parts in an opera, and they were both there. Like, and I just don't see that anymore, Shaunna. And so maybe this is my like silly white person, naive pilot light of hope thing, right? Like, how have we come so far from the capacity and even desire to be friends with and have fun with and, you know, engage in joyful things with people who think differently from us, right? That's kind of where I am and what I'm reflecting on, just because I just had this deep sadness last night that we are not there anymore, and I am not sure that we can get that back. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I love that. I actually posted that on some of my social media pages around them holding the little Altoid can, which I thought was so cute and hilarious, because based on the presidents and presidents' spouses protocol at most major events, such as funerals of other presidents or so forth, the order happens to be that President George W. is right next to Michelle Obama at almost every event. So that, you know, obviously they're creating a unique relationship, friendship, so forth, that due to social media and other things we're privy to, which is great. I want to take the easier route and say that a lot of this, here we go, girl, on our critical thinking soapbox here, where we do live in a current society that, yes, we got lots to be pissed off about. And at the same time, we don't have the critical thinking skills to lift up things that can be both true at the same time. And that's what's tough. Now, there are some things that rise to the level of, no, I don't mess with you. Like, for example, we currently live in a society where if you see someone with a red hat on, not even knowing necessarily what it might say on the front of it, you've already made some assumptions about the person, right?
Right.
I just saw an entire social media post where a African American gentleman wearing one of those hats talked about his reception in certain areas as a social experiment, if you will. So we know that type of thing is happening where we are literally canceling people out before we even get a chance to know them. And at the same time, there are other things that may not necessarily rise to that level of disagreement that we can't see each other as human beings. And I think that's where the problem lies. So, if, like, literally, if I say, I don't like coffee, I prefer tea, then there are literally people that will cancel your entire being because you don't agree on this one point. And it's not even a point that rises to the level of human values. It just rises to the level of human preference. Like, we don't have, I think we don't have enough critical thinking skills to hold a couple of things true at the same time. So, for example, the folks I was just talking about earlier, my good friend and her daughter that live down in Orlando, she is a registered Republican. Registered Republican, lives in Florida, benefits from lots of things that I don't necessarily agree with that happen in Florida. But yet she doesn't, I have the nuanced thinking to understand and watch based on her behavior that she and her family don't rise to the level of MAGA Republican. They disagree vehemently with lots of things that this current administration is doing on record. They have, similar to what we talked about previously on this podcast, seriously considered and grappled with going independent because on one hand, they didn't want to lose their primary vote, but at the same time, were so diametrically opposed to their former political party that they felt they needed to distance themselves. That takes nuance to even entertain that. Someone that's not a nuanced thinker would hear, as soon as I said my friend is Republican, their brain shut off at that point. Like they're not listening anymore. They're not trying to hear. And so I think there's at least two things going on. Human decency is disappearing on many levels. Like the fact that, and this may be an African American thing, but I think it's just a human thing. How many times have I walked past someone, I'm like within inches of the person and they can't say good morning, good afternoon, how you doing, head nod, nothing. Like, you have not acknowledged that a human being existed on the same sidewalk as you. Like, we don't even do that. Much less use our critical thinking to understand someone else's point of view. So we have a human foundation that I don't think exists anymore. And then I think we don't have a nuanced thinking. It's just an either or. So, like, do you support this or not? Do you support that or not? Are you okay with this or not? And it's like, it's not that simple. And I even hear other podcasters pose these questions to their co-hosts. Lisa, do you believe this? Yes or no? And as I'm hearing the question, I'm like, yeah, I would love to know the answer. But at the same time, this is Occam's razor. You're oversimplifying. There isn't a clean yes or no either or. There's lots of nuance that you're unwilling to sit and listen to.
Right.
And so then when the person says, I'm not going to entertain that question, it's not because they don't want to answer. It's because you force them to give a black and white answer to a very shades of gray question. And that's not fair either. So the human decency makes me sad, but also you always know the lack of critical thinking for me just will always be a point of a problematic point for me.
Yeah, I mean, and that comes up in pretty much every podcast we do, right? And I actually mentioned critical thinking in my class last night when I was teaching, and in relation to AI and how if you rely on AI, it will sap you of your capacity to critically think, right?
Yes.
Limit your ability to look past the surface and understand what might be going on underneath because you're not doing the work and you're not flexing your brain muscle. But there's just something, and I'm not trying to romanticize Bush, Clinton, Obama, and Biden and their administrations, because of course there were problems in all of them. But it's the human piece, I think, that you struck on, the humanity, like the relational human piece, right? That they don't throw insults at each other, right? If they don't get their way, they're able to, perhaps, I would assume, have conversations about differences of opinion that don't kind of devolve into shouting or insults
That's
or
right.
lies, right? And I think about
Mm-hmm.
what, like, why are so few people interested in that way of engaging with their fellow citizens? Why is it? Because it's just easier? The black and white thinking, the binary thinking is just easier, like, because the nuance is hard, and so it's too much effort to try and engage with someone who thinks differently than me. I'm just going to sit here and do my own thing. Is that what you think it is?
Uh, well, I think it's a couple things. I mean, I think, well, more than a couple of things. I think yes, it is easier. I think, you know, think about at what point in time do we even encourage critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like think about, so here in the US, and this, let me give my whole preface to say, this is not an obliteration of teachers K through 12 or K through even 32 in this country. This is not a bash on y'all. Y'all are working within a limited system. The limited system doesn't allow space for critical thinking.
Mm.
So if I'm going back to my fifth grader analogy with the reflecting pool, if I'm a fifth grader and it's time to rise up from elementary to middle school, but the majority of my entire year as a fifth grader has been preparing for and taking state and federal standardized testing to be able to compare learning and ability to think and retain knowledge across my county, state, and country. When has my teacher and I, as a student, had the
Mm.
opportunity to integrate critical thinking into anything that we do because we're
Right.
learning how to take a test? And so, if this is the rinse and repeat of learning in this country, and then, of course, you and I know once they get to even the undergraduate level, we're still trying to tease them out of that transactional thinking process of I give you this information and you give it back. No, I give you this information and you mull it over, you think it through, and you go in a completely different direction with it. Even there's limited time for critical thinking. And so once folks, graduate from college, or if they go to college at all, and then you add other things like improper, not all, but improper AI usage, at what point in life do we have a chance to actually critically think?
Yeah.
And then add on other identities. Yeah, I know a lot of people that would love to sit around and critically think, but they're trying to get in and out of a degree program or in and out of a vocational program. The stressors of life sometimes don't even allow you to stop and critically think about things because you're too busy trying to make ends meet. And so we do live in a society that doesn't allow us to critically think. If I went to school, let's say, and Lisa, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I had an opportunity to go to university in the UK and I didn't have to think about paying the bill and it's just part and parcel of my lived experience, I've got a bit more space
Mm-hmm.
to think, to process, to critically think, to not worry, oh my God, if I don't get this paper done, then, and get to work, then I'm not going to be able to afford to come back and think. Like the entire society is built in such a way that it doesn't create space for critical thinking. And now we talked about it before where we have major senior leader decision makers that don't critically think, number one, and number two, they create even more community and societal structures that create even less space for us to critical think. Then when are we actually going to do it?
Do you think that critical thinking has to be in place for you to treat a human as a human, like with care and compassion?
Oh, no, no, no. I don't think, going back to my point around the, humanity and critical thinking, I don't think that they're sequential. Like, I don't think that you got to be a critical thinker in order to treat someone like a human. That absolutely is not what I'm saying. And in fact, we have proof of the opposite of that, in that there's lots of folks that are the, how can I say, they truly are kind of like the nice, nasty people. Yes, they treat people kind, but there are other major issues that we disagree on. because there hasn't been any critical thinking that area, but they're not treating people like crap. They just
So
don't think deeply
yeah.
about these other major areas.
So that's the piece, right? Like, that
Yeah.
in a, critical thinking is in there certainly, but the inability to see someone else's humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and to reduce these complicated life issues to this or that, yes or no, black or white. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things, I think is funny, and I'll end it here, I guess, is so years ago, you will all remember that President Obama wore a tan suit to a press conference. I forget, I think he was talking about Syria, maybe. And his
Mm-hmm.
tan suit was derided by many of his critics, Republican legislators and other folks, pundits on the conservative right, as being too relaxed, not formal enough, like inappropriate attire for a press conference about something so important, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's ludicrous, and it also seems so quaint to think that that was the level of critique being leveled at President Obama, when given what we have now and how folks have acquiesced and capitulated. But
Mm-hmm.
at the opening of his presidential center, a number of people, more than one, came in a tan suit. So they came to the event in a tan suit. And that
Mm-hmm.
was amusing to everyone there, right? Regardless of their ideological position. They were able to look at that past behavior and recognize the ridiculousness of it, and then kind of reinvent it in this moment. And I think I think it might have been the CEO of the foundation who got up to speak, and President Obama was like, "Love that tan suit," and everyone
Right.
was, right? And I just feel like that, the humanity, the funny, that is what's missing. And that's a humanity thing, I think, that we just don't see anymore. So anyway, so I just was
All or
reflecting on
nothing.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
All or nothing. It's we are no longer in a place and space in this country where I can disagree with you and even speak to you. That I can even disagree with you and say good morning to you. That I can, like, when did we get such a strong muscle in ignoring people, like
Right.
ignoring human beings? And I wonder if it ends up being this huge defense mechanism that has gotten out of sorts for us. Like, the better I can ignore you and act like you don't exist, the safer I am, because of the harm that happens when we do exchange and interact.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, that is so, I was doing some research on something that I'm delivering on Sunday, and one of the most polarizing characters around, since we're still in Pride Month, around the LGBT movement, Jerry Falwell
Mm-hmm.
Sr., well, actually the whole family, but Jerry Falwell Sr., he did a number of different things in his body of work of ministry that were very flagrantly anti-LGBT, et cetera, earlier on in his ministry. And then later in his ministry, even as he disagreed with the LGBT lifestyle, he still talked about human rights of those very same people. Of, just because I disagree with their sin, he said, I still want them to have clean air and clean water and housing and food. And as much as I think he is a despicable person, at the same time, you still saw a glimmer of humanity there
Yeah.
that I don't think would even be here today, frankly. So I do give that glimmer of credit, but we don't even see that. It's all or
No.
nothing.
No, we don't.
You
We don't.
disagree with me, I hope you drop dead right now. Like, that's what people are literally thinking around certain groups. It's like, oh my goodness. So it goes back to that question you asked me a few episodes ago. Do you think we'll ever work our way back to the middle? And I'm not sure, and I doubt it.
Mm. Yeah.
We don't have the skills to do it.
Well, and yeah, and it's getting worse, right? Because the generation that's coming up behind us has only known this culture, this kind of way of engaging with people. They have no lived experience of Clinton, Obama,
There you go.
Bush and Biden they do, but maybe younger. But yeah, they don't have it. It's always been this for them. So
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Well, and it goes back. I don't know. I thought you might have sent it to me. I know this might be a whole nother podcast, so we might need to stop here. But just reminding you, there was, I think it was an Instagram post that you might have sent me around what if there were 9 different political parties and what their characteristics were. And I think, this lack of humanity, lack of perspective, or even trying to understand a different perspective, it is causing a splintering in many ways, a
Yeah.
human splintering, a political splintering. It's causing a splintering, and when something is splintered, it's very hard to put back together, if not impossible.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. So,
All
but
right. Well,
anyway,
let's leave it there on that really uplifting note.
look, we might be saying try to be a George W. and Michelle in a cancel culture age. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate their back and forth and laughter. I think it's
Yeah.
incredible. All right. Well, that's it for this week's episode of the Unfazed, Unedited podcast. You know where you can find us, all of your favorite podcast apps, or you can email us at info@unfazed podcast with any ideas, questions, topics that you'd like for us to cover. And also, too, the default setting, go to our website to find everything, the unfazedpodcast.com, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access both the new and the old shows, because we are encroaching upon 250. We're almost there. So if you like this week's episode, please like, subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So until next time.
All right. See you next time.